Sairam students, today we will continue with this chapter number 5, Jane Eyre at Lowood Institution. I am sure students, you all are ready with a pen and a notebook to write all the important points that we are going to learn today. Before we continue with this chapter, students, we will first recap whatever we have learned in our last session. Jane Eyre is a novel by Charlotte Bronte about an orphan young girl. She lives unhappily with her relatives, with her wealthy relatives. Mrs. Reed, before he died, he took promise from Mrs. Reed to take care of Jane like one of her own child. But at the beginning, Mrs. Reed, at that moment she said yes, but then later she denied, and she did not keep her promise. Mrs. Reed does not want Jane to be her family member, so she kept on punishing her and disturbing her. One day she was badly punished. She was punished and she was imprisoned in the Red Room. This Red Room is the place where her uncle died. Jane was feared of this room. She feels she could see her uncle's ghost appearing all around. And because of her fear, she has a fit. Mr. Lloyd was called upon to check Jane's health. Mr. Lloyd understood Jane's condition and he suggested Mrs. Reed to send her to Lowood Institution. After hearing this, Mrs. Reed was very happy as she wanted to get rid of Jane. So she decided to send Jane immediately to Lowood Institution. Finally, she called Mr. Brocklehurst and she told Mr. Brocklehurst that Jane is a liar, she is ungrateful girl. She fed Mr. Brocklehurst with all wrong information. One day, he announced in front of the entire school that Jane is a liar and nobody should talk to her. She is an ungrateful girl and teachers must keep eye on her. After hearing this, Jane was very depressed. She cried her grief with her best friend Helen Burns. Helen Burns tried to explain her. She tried to console her. She told her that there are only 80 who have heard this. But there are more millions and hundreds of people in this world where she can prove that she is the best. Students, this is where we have stopped this chapter. Now, let us continue ahead and read further. Well, Helen, said I, putting my hand into hers. She chafed my fingers gently to warm them and went on. If the entire world hated you and believed you to be wicked, while your own conscience approved you and absolved you from guilt, you would not be without friends. No, I know. I should think well of myself, but that's not enough. If others do not love me, I would rather die than live. I cannot bear to be solitary and hated. To gain some real affection from you or Miss Temple or any other whom I truly love, I would willingly submit to have the bone of my arm broken or to let a bull toss me. Or, students, here we understand that Helen Burns tried to explain and console Jane by saying that even if the world hates you, you must believe in yourself. Jane replies that she understands she should think positive, but she cannot bear to be alone or to be hated by anyone. She feels if others do not love or respect her, then she should rather die. Due to this depression, she thought of various methods where she can punish herself, like to have the bone of her arm broken or to have the bull tossed on her, and many other methods she was thinking of. I hope students you all have understood till here, and now let us learn and write few more new words. Alright students, the first word is chafed. Chafed means rubbed. Then is wicked. Wicked means evil or morally wrong. After that is conscious. Conscious means a person's moral sense of right and wrong. After that is absolved. Absolve means forgive. I hope students you all have written and learned these words. And now let us move ahead and learn further. Hush, Jane, you think too much. I know you are innocent of this charge, which Mr. Brocklehurst has weakly and pompously repeated at second hand from Mrs. Reed, for I read sincerity in your eyes. I was silent. Helen had calmed me. I rested my head on Helen's shoulder, and we reposed in silence. We had not sat long thus, when another person came in. I came in purpose to find you, Jane Eyre, said Miss Temple. I want you in my room, and as Helen Burns is with you, she may too. Students, here we understand that Helen tried to console Jane, and she asked Jane not to think too much, as she can see sincerity in her. She also says that Mr. Brocklehurst has just repeated the wrong information which She also says that Mr. Brocklehurst has just repeated the wrong information which was initially passed by Mrs. Reed. Helen had finally calmed Jane, and now Miss Temple has entered. Miss Temple wanted Helen and Jane to be in their room. I hope students you all have understood till here, and now let us learn few more new words. The first one, solitary. Solitary means lonely. Next is toss. Toss means throw. Then the next is pompous. Pompously. Pompously means self-importantly. Then is sincerity. Sincerity means honesty. I hope students you all have understood till here and you all have written these words. And now let us move ahead and read further. We followed the superintendent's guidance and crossed some intricate passages before we reached the apartment. It contained a good fire and looked cheerful. Miss Temple told Helen Burns to be seated in a low-armed chair on one side of the hearth, and herself taking another, she called me to her side. "Is it all over?" she asked, looking down at my face. "Have you cried your grief away?" "I'm afraid I never shall do that." "Why?" "Because I have been wrongly accused, and you, madam, and everybody else will now think me wicked." Students, here we understand that Jane, Helen, and Miss Temple were walking towards their apartment. While they were moving ahead, they crossed some complicated apart which contains good fire and looks cheerful. As soon as they reached the apartment, Miss Temple asked Helen to sit in low armchair near the hearth, and she herself sat just beside her with Jane. Miss Temple asked Jane if she had cried her grief. Jane replied her by saying she has been wrongly accused by Mr. Brocklehurst. Students, I hope you all have understood till here, and now let us learn and write few more new words. The first one, reposed. Reposed means relax or sleep. Next is intricate. Intricate means very complicated. Then is hearth. Hearth means the floor at the base of a fire. After that is accused. Accused means a person who is charged with a crime. I hope students you all have understood till here, and now let us move ahead. We shall think you what you prove yourself to be. My child, continue to act as a good girl, and You will satisfy us. Shall I, Miss Temple? You will, said she, passing her arm around me. And now tell me, who is the lady whom Mr. Brocklehurst called your benefactress? Students, in this paragraph, Miss Temple asked Jane to continue to act like a good girl. She also wanted to know the name of the benefactress. Here, benefactress means Mrs. Reed, as she is the one who gives money or benefit or any help to the organization. Let's read further. Mrs. Reed, my uncle's wife. My uncle is dead and he left me to her care. Did she not then adopt you of her own accord? No, ma'am. She was sorry to have to do it. But my uncle, as I have often heard that my uncle got her to promise before he died that she would always keep me. Well, Jane, when a criminal is accused, he is always allowed to speak in his own defense. You have been charged with falsehood. Defend yourself to me as well as you can. Say whatever your memory suggests is true, but add nothing and exaggerate nothing. Students, here we understand that Miss Temple had kind attitude towards Jane. She even agreed to hear Jane's side of story, knowing that she had been charged as a falsehood. She gave her a chance to defend herself. I hope students you all have understood till here, and now let us learn few new words. The first one, accord. Accord means free will. Next is exaggerate. Exaggerate means overstate or overestimate. Then next is benefactress. Benefactress means a woman who gives money or other help to a person or an organization. Students, let us quickly revise whatever we have learned in this session. We understood that Jane was very depressed after Mr. Brocklehurst has insulted her in front of entire school. She felt that her reputation was ruined and she had lost her respect. Helen Burns was Jane's good friend. She tried to explain and console her by telling there are only 80 of people in this school, whereas there are hundreds and millions of people in this world to whom she can prove that she is the best. Jane feels that she cannot bear to be alone or hated. She also feels that if others do not love and respect her, then she should rather die. Due to depression, Jane thought of various methods to punish herself, like to have the bone of her arm broken, or to let the bull toss her, and many other varied methods she thought of to punish herself. After hearing this, Helen said not to think so much, and she feels sincerity in her. Helen also explains that Mr. Brocklehurst has just repeated the information which was initially given by Mrs. Reed. Later, Miss Temple wants both Jane and Helen to be in her room, as she has soft corner for Jane and she wanted to know the truth. Miss Temple was beautiful and kind superintendent in Lowood Institution. While Jane and Helen were walking towards Miss Temple's apartment, they crossed many complicated paths which contained a good fire and its looked cheerful. As soon as they reached the apartment, Miss Temple asked Helen to sit in a low armchair just beside the hearth, and she herself sat beside her along with Jane. Jane informed Miss Temple that she is being wrongly accused by Mr. Brocklehurst. Finally, we also understood Miss Temple asked Jane to continue to act as a good girl, and she also wanted to know the lady whom Mr. Brocklehurst called her benefactress. Miss Temple was very clear that Jane was charged with falsehood, so she asked her to defend herself. Alright student, I will stop this chapter here and we will continue this chapter in the next session. Before that, you all know you will be getting an assignment. You need to complete your assignment and then click OK. Alright. Sairam, take care.